Hello, and welcome back to Listen Up Startups. I'm your host, Ashley Collins, founder and CEO of Humane Startup. Joining me here today is Michael Sassano, CEO of Somai Pharmaceuticals. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You got it.
Wonderful. And I'm really excited to have you on the show today. I have a soft spot in my heart for challengers, for folks who are out in the field disrupting the status quo and doing that in a fearless way. And you've got quite the resume, my friend. And the work that you're doing right now, anytime you're trying to shake anything up and the word pharmaceuticals is involved, you've got to have some pretty thick skin. So without further ado, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and what you're currently up to our audience.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ashley. As you said, I'm the CEO of Somai Pharmaceuticals, and what we're doing is bringing the cannabis industry to Europe, actually globally, and that is competing directly with the pharmaceutical companies. So unlike in the United States, where our projects there concentrate on the adult use recreational market, and we call that OTC over here. For Europe, it's a pure pharmaceutical model, and we are making registered medicines to get out to patients across the EU as well as the globe.
That's amazing. And how did you find yourself in this world? What got you into working with cannabis and trying to shake things up, provide some alternatives?
Well, it started quite a while ago, and in the United States, it was an emerging market. It combined different skills of both venture capitalism and building development because there was a great infrastructure needed. And I used to be, in my younger days, a banker on Wall Street, and then eventually became a real estate developer. And so it fit both my skill sets to both develop real estate, build the infrastructure, and also try to get a larger upside, let's say, because of the emergence of the industry. So, and cannabis has continued. For the last decade plus that I've been investing in it and working in it, has continued a steep upward rise. So the progression to come back to Europe, for one, I've predominantly lived in Europe most of the last 20-something years of my life, but I spent 5 or 6 years in the U.S. markets earlier on. And so to be back here and bringing the cannabis products to the European market is both a lifestyle change and also a great opportunity to go head to head with pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, and I just even saying that gives me shivers.
Yes.
So what's life been like for you in reality as you've done that? I think so many of us would love to have that kind of courage. So hats off.
I mean, they're in the background of cannabis, whether they're lobbying the U.S. Political scene or lobbying the EU political scene. It's very clear. One of the main indications in uses of cannabis is chronic pain. So, nobody wants something coming along and chipping away at their cash cows. So, that's very scary when you're entering into that space. But there's a legal framework around it. I had a lot of experience building these facilities in the U.S. It was a challenge building a truly pharmaceutical grade. You may hear that coin word in U.S. facilities a lot, but the fact is it's a whole world of difference when you're actually making a medicine that's commensurate with any medicine, whether it's vaccines, opioids, or aspirins. The process, the needs for the building are completely different. And then, if you take it one step further, if you build the structure, well, that's one thing. Now you have to register products, and the registration of a product is completely different. So in the U.S., I would say it's more like a restaurant grade a product where you make the product, you sell it the next day, and you can make a lot of products, concentrates, vaporizers, gummy bears, whatever you can think of. Well, when you're making a pharmaceutical product, that's a completely different world. And you have to think more in terms of how things are dosed, doctors, how to prescribe it to doctors. So you're thinking drops, sprays, gel caps. You have to do stability studies, means you have to test each time you make a new product and put it in stability chambers for how long that product will last on the shelf. And then, advanced studies, PK studies, absorption studies, sometimes clinical studies in vivo, in vitro, in mice or in humans. So, that complexity and that expense, clearly advantages large pharmaceutical companies with extremely large pockets.
Budgets.
And our industry, in totality, if you take the whole global cannabis industry, equates to a quarter for one of the large pharmaceutical companies. So, it's you're competing in a range, undercapitalized, and with a lot of hope to bring products that can help people.
Yeah, and so like practically, how are you doing that? Right? It sounds like this just insurmountable feat. So how are you overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, well, there's nothing easy about it. You have to have a solid plan. You have to watch your burn carefully. You can't make many mistakes because the burn will eat you alive. You know, you're I mean, you're watching every little detail, and making sure and reevaluating your plan. In order to produce, well, first to build the facility, as I said.
Yeah.
Secondly, to register these products, which is a feat in and of itself,
Yeah.
and then convince doctors to prescribe this to patients. So one, two, three, is a lot of work to get there, and you just have to keep plugging away. I mean, I'm in this industry, so I'm not going anywhere, and we have to we're always making sure that our capital restraints are intact, our budgets are tight, and that we're producing more medicines than everyone, because that's one of our main goals. Actually, we're producing over 68 registered medicines this
Wow.
year, and these are medicines that can travel globally. There's no boundaries. There's no state boundaries that have been drawn. These are global products that go all over, and every quarter there's a new country coming online or announcing new regulations or proposing new regulations to come. So you're thinking in a different size. Where in the United States, I was thinking, how do I conquer this state, or how do I achieve a good result in this state? And here I'm thinking, well, from the beginning, when you built it, from the medicines you're creating, you're thinking, how do I service a global community?
Yeah.
And that's also you have to really change your mind from where you came from to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up something that is interesting to me, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about, which is getting doctors to prescribe. And because I know, like, when I was first coming out of university, like everybody wanted to go get into pharmaceutical sales because you could be a young whippersnapper, go through a few weeks of training, and then just go make a killing. But the world has changed so much since the old days of sort of almost like debauchery and bribery. So what does that process look like today? Getting doctors on board to understand and prescribe.
Yeah, I mean, I watched all these videos, even older movies on pharmaceutical sales, and I think you're exactly right. Debauchery is the word, and I can equate that to the early days of banking. When I was over
Yeah.
at Lehman Brothers, the world becomes gentrified over decades, and so too has the pharmaceutical industry. It's a real challenge. There is no advertising. You can't put your
Right.
product out and say, hey, buy this product, and put it on the TV or put it in print. There's rules regarding that. It's still a very old school way of boots on the ground, walking into the door and talking to the doctors and explaining to them your products. And as you might imagine, these doctors don't want 100 people, walking through that door.
No.
And, of course, there's salesmen that have access to these doctors. But then, you have to explain to them why your product is better. And once you get through that door, let's say, assuming you get through that door, and now you want to explain why that product is better. And what one of the edges that we have and that we've brought to the market is we know the products from the US market. We know what works. There's
Right.
there's already enough empirical evidence with a 30 plus billion-dollar market,
Yeah.
what patients want. And we're lucky because we had dispensaries and we get the information directly from the patients and clients, what they like, what brands they like, what flavors they like, fast acting absorption. So what we decided to do is reverse engineer the product. So rather than like a pharmaceutical company that'll spend years in R&D, we took the best products of the US market and said, well, if they're the best here, they have to
Yeah.
be the best. And then we had to do some engineering because for our products, because they're extractable products, people don't want to wait 1 hour for the basic, cannabinoidal mix with MCT oil. They want a fast acting absorption. They want something
Yeah.
with better bioavailability. Well, that's an edge that the Europeans never even thought to enter into,
Yeah.
which we're bringing. Sure, we'll bring them the basic products, but we'll also bring them the advanced products. And, we also concentrated on everybody was just doing drops, the initial people. And you're talking only
Yeah.
1-2 years old extractable products in Europe. So we're very much at the 2.0, and we're bringing the 3 and 4.0 with drops, sprays,
Yeah.
which don't exist, gel caps, which don't exist, transdermal patches, which don't exist. And then we're taking that and we're marrying it to the science, which is, an entire other project, let's say, when you're trying to combine those two and explain to them why the faster absorption works, better. And it seems common sense to us that if you're in pain or you're
Yeah.
having an epileptic seizure or whatever you might be having that you're using this for, well, you don't want to wait 1 hour for it to take effect. You
No.
want it there in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and to get, all the effects that you've taken that pill for or that drops for. So,
Yeah.
the doctors need to know this and that whole educational process. Imagine there's only 300, maybe 400 doctors in all of Europe that have
Yeah.
gotten on the bandwagon to prescribe it and see the benefits for their patients. And that, of course, that's a large amount considering you come from zero not so
Yeah.
long ago.
Yeah. But
But
I'll tell you what, it's amazing you say that, because I don't know, being a US expat living in London and, well, outside of London, and engaging with the medical system here, it has it it does feel like there is a greater risk aversion to exploring new methods, new options. It's just kind of like it's in, culturally across not just like medicine, but just anything. It's just like, this is how we've always done it, so we're gonna keep doing it this way until there's a really, really compelling reason not to. And nobody wants to be like the first one to do anything, whether it's trying a new tech or pushing a new boundary, because it's like, it just very opposite to the US, where it's just like, I want to be the trailblazer. I want to be the one that found this first. It just the opposite mentality. Have you felt that in your interactions as well?
I mean, absolutely. Look, if you take the UK market as an example, it's one of the, let's say, six main markets in the EU. I guess we could still say the EU region, um, and the whether you're in the US or EU, the biggest complaint is always regulators.
Yeah.
Well, you have governments that are throwing mixed signals, out there. And who wants to deal with a mixed signal, especially if you're a doctor and trying to prescribe something?
Yeah.
and it's you're fighting a headwind, and and one day they want cannabis, the next day, a few months ago, there was the MP saying, okay, we're going to even make it a worse scheduling, and we're going to put this, this is not a medicine. Well, the UN voted already in
Yeah.
December of 2020 for this to be a medicine, so you can't like put the genie back in the bottle. So they throw curbs in your way. So they
Yeah.
say, okay, if you want this medicine, if you want to prescribe this, you got to try 3 different remedies for whatever you're trying to solve. So if it's pain relief, try 3 different remedies, and then you can prescribe cannabis. Well, that's, a fictitious barrier, you
Yeah.
know, where there should be a right to try. And Germany abolished that in 2017 and said doctors have the right to prescribe what they want for their patients in regards to cannabis. Switzerland followed that rule last year. You no longer have to go to the federal government of Switzerland in order to prescribe cannabis to your patients. Doctors can prescribe directly. Spain's coming out with their regulations, any day now. So it was
Yeah.
supposed to be at the end of last year. So that's coming. France announced just the other day that they're looking at expanding and this was not, this was just a government organization, that they're looking to expand access to get rid of the black market. You know, on and on. You have a lot of
Yeah.
going on where there's pro cannabis countries, but you always have within those countries people that are completely, on the other side. And I understand that, but those don't advance, not just what we're trying to do, which is bring the medicines out there, but it doesn't help the people that are trying to find other relief from things that, from something that's less harmful than what they're currently trying to take.
Yeah, and I think, as an individual trying to sort through all of your options and make a decision that's best for your own health, like it's incredibly overwhelming. And I think there's, you've got heaps of misinformation. I think some of it may be intentionally planted to keep things, cruising the way that it is. Is there, do you have any advice for folks in terms of educating themselves, and maybe even being able to play a more like almost an advocate role for themselves and for the folks that they love, when they're thinking through medicinal options and working directly with their doctors?
I think one of the biggest movement that has created this, not just in the United States, but in Canada and other countries now, is not necessarily the doctors driving this. It's the people driving it and saying that they want it.
Yeah.
And even if you look at any of the polls that have been done in any of the countries here, even in Europe, there's a large majority of people that have tried cannabis for various reasons, whether it could be as simple as stress, anxiety, sleep. It doesn't have to be major things like epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and stage 3 cancer, appetite suppressions, things like that. So, the when the people keep pushing, and we know that it's, we're not living in an age where we don't know that there's a large black market that exists.
Yeah.
And this is something that politicians are trying to combat, because there's no quality standard.
Yeah.
You don't know what pesticides have been used to create these products. It's harmful for the consumer. And the health minister of Germany is being very vocal about it. Just a week ago, he came out with a report and he said, look, the harms of not legalizing, and making this product over the counter is far greater than you can imagine, continuing the war on it. And, and, the French ministry just this week said the same. One of the groups said the same thing. So, these movements are going. It doesn't mean that overnight it's just going to happen. So, for people that need the access, that have more serious ailments, you have to find a place that's beneficial to get it, and you deserve to try it and to see if it works for you. because the simple fact is, no matter how much has been taken, nobody's died from cannabis. So you have a safe alternative to
Yeah.
what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing to mention, because it's really interesting just in general at the moment. There are a lot of progressive things that are happening, like disruption in like old systems, be they financial, be they pharmaceutical. And there seems to be this pattern emerging where it's like, if it's a departure from what I trust because that's what I was taught when I was young, then I'm going to put it through the absolute paces in terms of understanding exactly how it works, arguing about it. But there's not that same level of an understanding about the incumbent option that they're looking to walk away from, right? So I would, on a lot of things, just encourage folks to think critically and to educate themselves and to not get caught up in the fear mongering, and expect a little bit of resistance coming from folks who it doesn't benefit to see things, moving in a new direction. So I think as you rightly pointed out, there is so much empirical evidence now where cannabis is concerned. This is not like essential oils, where everybody's out claiming all sorts of that's not what this is. So if you do have the desire to learn more, there's a lot of information out there for you. And do you have some resources that you recommend people like engage with in order to simplify the process of better educating themselves?
I mean, it's almost overwhelming how much resources out there.
Yeah.
Just the other day, an article came across, and it had 700 indications that cannabis is currently in clinical trials over. And I thought, even though it was quite overwhelming, the links, it would just say, okay, this is for, autism. And there would be 4 or 5 links to clinical studies. And for the average person, that's way too much.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't necessarily make sense. When I can't even tell you how many times I get a call from friends or others that they said, look, I was in the United States for, a few weeks. We went to this dispensary. I tried these edibles. I didn't have stress. I slept better. How can I get that in the EU? And I have to tell them, look, you got to go to your doctor of your country and explain to them what you're looking to solve. And then they come back to me and they say, well, my doctor told me there's no evidence that there's this helps with sleep. And I am like, okay, well, here's a sleep study that was just done recently in Australia, on a clinical study on sleep, and it does help. And then they show me another article where it's like, this was a sleep study that was done and it didn't have the efficacy. And, that's the dichotomy out there
Yeah.
of these. There's a pharmaceutical wants you to think there's one size fits all. But
Yeah.
in cannabis, there's thousands of strains, thousands of different products and mixes,
Yes.
and there's no one size fits all. So you may not get a clinical study may not get you the results that you were expecting, but it may have the result on you if you try different versions, because the educational level isn't even out there for professionals like me to be able to
Yeah.
point to something and say, here it is. This definitively proves it. I don't even have that because I can find something else that says, here's where it failed.
Yeah.
But it
Absolutely.
doesn't mean that you can't try, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't help millions of people already with whatever they're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. And that's music to my ears, because one of the things that I've been advocating for, so full disclosure, I am autistic ADHD. And two out of my 3 kids, we have taken forward. They've met with pediatric psychiatrists, and they've recommended that they go through neurodevelopmental diagnosis for ASD and ADHD, and we're still deciding what we want to do with that. But this whole concept of understanding your equipment, and then whether you're neurodivergent or not, recognizing that you have a very unique brain and a very unique physiology, and it's up to you to get to know it. And healthcare and medicine is nuanced no matter what. And it's interesting that you bring up this one size fits all approach, because this advocating for that is like, it's not accurate even in traditional big pharma. Like, there are 36 different types of stimulants used to treat ADHD, even though there are only 2 base molecules for that. And it's for all of the reasons that you just mentioned: absorption rates, intake methods, and the problems they've been trying to solve with these different formulations is avoiding like the crash that comes when that medicine wears off quickly, right? So this
That's exactly
exists
right.
everywhere, whether you see this all over the place today, and how you use it when you're pediatric versus how you use it when you're an adult, and then as you move through the different stages of life, like, things are just flexing all the time, and it's sort of an individual trial and error of what works for you based on how your body's cranking, and it's constantly influenced by external factors.
This is exactly right. This is exactly right. And look, you could even add more complexities, male or female. Okay.
Yeah.
You could add complexities of weight, because
Yeah.
absorption is different. Severity of your autism. There's so many different factors that go into it that it's almost impossible. And in some respect, cannabis could be designed better for treating these, because there's a variety and different dosaging and different ways of looking at it than the one size fits all model.
Yeah.
And the people's right to try, it should be preeminent, considering the safety of cannabis that we know empirically today.
Yeah. And it's this, I'm trying to regulate myself as we move through this conversation, because it does bring up passion points. I have a family friend whose older child recently went on medication for ADHD, and what they were not informed of is that their particular variety of medication required that they take it every day, otherwise they were at risk of heart attack. They didn't tell the mom that. So they went in for like a checkup, because you have to really stay on this, and it takes like 6 months to figure out whether or not it's having the impact that it's supposed to have. And she had kind of casually brought up in conversation, like, he's missed a few doses, and it was like, oh my God, you can't do that with this kind, you've got to blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, if I had known that, never would have put him on it, because he's just, executive dysfunction is a problem with ADHD. Like, you're going to have missed doses. So I think, this right to try and understanding the true severity, like the possible negative repercussions of what you're trying and what's truly safest out there is just so important. Like, I can't overemphasize, like, educating yourself and just making sure that you can advocate, and just have informed conversations, because you're going to get pushback, and there's not consistent ongoing education in a whole variety of areas with medical professionals. And I feel for them, this is not like I'm not trying to knock anybody. The job, especially in the UK right now, like, with what's going on with the NHS, like, I just feel for anybody who signed themselves up to provide care in the UK. Their job is overwhelming. They're so understaffed and underserved. And so, of course, it would make sense that, getting out there and finding new ways of doing things is not the top priority, just in crisis mode at the moment.
Yeah. And, there's also, cultural differences, from the U.S. perspective. I think we're a lot more equipped for mental health.
I would agree.
And I have a whole file on autism and ADHD, PTSD, and well, there's many categories I could go on, but I have a large file on those. And there was an interesting story where one of my American employees ended up coming over here, and for medical insurance, they filled out their form and they said, "I have ADHD" on the medical form, and they asked for the insurance company for that. Now they were quite significantly younger than I was, and the insurance company said, "Wow, they have ADHD," and the price went up to 2,500 a month or a year in insurance, whereas mine was 800, you know. And I looked at it and I said, "What happened here?" And they're like, "Oh, you have ADHD." And I was like, "Well, you take cannabis for ADHD." They go, "Yeah." I go, "Well, do you need a doctor for this?" They're like, "No, I don't need a doctor, but I wanted to put this on the form
To
because
be
of the
honest.
insurance." And I said, "Well, all right, it's a difference of a cultural understanding here. They look at this as extremely debilitating, and whereas Americans, we're used to, people having this, and there's prescriptions, or there's more, let's say, readily available therapies for us, over there. So you're in a different world right now. So okay, so be it, as it is. But think about if you want to be going to a doctor here in Europe, or you want to be going to your doctor in the United States when you're trying to address this issue, because you may not find the skill factors here. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're living. Then that's why I made the comment, like, we're deciding what we want to do with our kids, because I don't necessarily know that I want a formal diagnosis following them around while we're living in Europe, because as you mentioned, I think because I come from the US and I was diagnosed there, the reaction was just like, "Oh, okay, cool. Now we better understand you so we can
that's
support
right.
you." It's like, okay, whatever. Like, it was no big thing. And then I started talking about it here, and it's like the educational system is like, "Oh God, what are we going to have to do to accommodate you now?" And like, "Are you sure he has it? Because he's smart." Like, it's just like this whole freak out happened that I was really not anticipating.
Exactly.
We could have a whole separate chat about that. But and in all seriousness, we do have quite a few listeners in the audience that are neurodiversity advocates in the workplace, who are neurodivergent parents, who have neurodivergent kids and are trying to navigate this. So any insight that you have, relative to that specifically, we could definitely maybe circle back on that, or even schedule a follow-up session chat to just go through that, because it is a world unto itself.
It absolutely is. And, even though there's not enough clinical data to support a lot of the, well, almost most of the psychological, let's say, areas of cannabis use. And I'm not one of the, advocates that, it's kind of like my big fat Greek wedding, spray Windex on it, and, it's going to fix everything. You know,
I love
Cannabis isn't going to fix everything, and it works for some and it doesn't work for others. So, I come from the school, of, more of trial and error in a lot of these things, until we find enough clinical evidence that supports what we're doing. And the real trouble with all of that is as the larger markets are recreational, well, it doesn't really emphasize people to explore these clinical trials and put money into it. If you make a medicine, and then you could go down to the dispensary and get a gummy bear that has the exact same mix. So in some way, it may not support. I mean, there is a world of pharmaceutical, Epidiolex, Sativex. There is a world of herbal medicines, similar to exactly what we make. And there is a world of over-the-counter recreational that exists, and all can coincide in one way. And it depends on how advanced people are to want to take matters into their own hands, because they've gone down the road, with doctors, and they're just not finding resolve. And I think that's where you see a really large swath of the pyramid. People are just saying, "All right, look, I'm taking this into my own hands now." And, in some cases, this is the right thing. And in some cases, it's not. There's no right answer on this one. And some people have real issues that need solving. So, I'm always available. As a matter of fact, most of what I do now is educate the doctors, and I do it in a more humorous way, to bring a little bit of levity to their situation, because they're like, well, you don't have all of these advanced studies like Epidiolex has.
Yeah.
Yes, this is true. We don't have this, but imagine this, and I have to kind of bring them along a road and bridge these gaps for them. It's enlightening because I show them what's behind the picture. Well, behind the picture is direct discussions with our patients. Like, wow,
Yeah.
producers could talk directly to their patients. I was like, yes, we call it a dispensary, and there's a questionnaire, and you get a free pre-roll if you fill out that that
Yes.
information and tell us what happened, how did it
Yes.
happen. They're like
Love that.
mind boggled by that.
That is like real humans on the other side of this sharing their
Yes,
experience.
completely insane to them. That I would have that information without HEPA rules and all of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's just I love it so much. But it does cast like such a powerful vision of what the future could look like if we start to approach these things in a different way. And it's not about no longer requiring empirical evidence. It's not about medicine becoming the Wild West. We've tried that path as a society. It was interesting. I just picked up a book when I was at the Science Museum. They have like a beautiful and amazingly robust medical science department and exhibit there. And the book was called Medicine, the Imperfect Science. And it's just like, it is fascinating spending time with the different things that we have done since the inception of humanity to try to maintain and improve our well-being. And
Yeah.
boy, have we made a lot of mistakes along the way. But so
Yeah.
it is important to learn from that and to make sure that we're capturing this data. But I think it's also important that we keep an open mind about safer ways that we can support and preventative ways so that we're not constantly treating symptom after symptom when we could take better care of ourselves on the front end.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did want to talk to you about, because I think you do have such a robust and strong business background, I think, and you have decided to take something on that requires a significant degree of resilience, and you've walked us through the curveballs that you're constantly getting hit, the misconceptions that you need to override. Like, what practically within your life, what routines, mechanisms, tools do you have in your toolkit to navigate that and stay sane?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a workaholic, unfortunately. This is how my life has gone. I wake up, thinking about what I'm going to be doing that day, and I go to sleep thinking, what did I miss that day? I have a notepad next to my bed, where if I wake up, in the middle of the night with some nightmare, I write down what happened, and I wake up the next morning and read it and say, this is something I should bring to the business, because there's, constantly a worry. I'm not saying my life is the most healthy way that makes sense for anybody. It's just unfortunately the way I'm wired. And driving this industry, you have to keep in mind the herbal medicine market. Is $150 billion industry. That's just the herbal medicine market I'm speaking of, which is where we fall into. And although big pharma loves their single elements, the complexity and all of them have come from a plant. So whether it's your opioids or whatever you're thinking, it came from a plant, and then they boiled it down to one singular element and said, "This is the one."
It's all
And
molecules,
somehow,
baby.
yeah. And so, just the reading necessary in order to understand all of these combinations of herbs. And okay, cannabis unfortunately has more combinations than I could even fathom. And still I'm learning more. And it's like there's these elements that come up, and we're like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And although these are in trace amounts, in small amounts, these all have an effect. So trying to understand all of those effects is quite complicated. And even when I was at CPHI and I was with all the different pharmacy groups, and a lot of the herbal guys, we were all talking. They have great products. I see that they have extracts from plants that will help people for, whatever it might be, diabetes, and they were explaining why their plant is better than, a pill or a single element, and why their extracts, have more effect. Well, that's just, millions and millions of pages of reading on a
Yeah.
constant basis. And for anybody that wants to enter into a space or get into something that they may not know or they have a desire to get into, I would, one of the biggest things that always drives me, and gets me through a lot of these things is I'm a constant reader of anything that comes up. I take notes, I put notes into a file, and then if I ever need to go back and pick them up, I can pick up my autism file, and I have notes on every article, so I don't have to go
Yeah.
reread all the articles. And so, this is a tool that's helped me, really get a lot of this stuff done and get to where we are.
That's amazing. And I appreciate the honesty. I think it's been really interesting witnessing LinkedIn of late. And there's, I think rightfully so, a want to move away from what has been called like hustle culture. But I think there's also a very real danger in prescribing any one way of being, right? And I think we've got to make space for like there is a truth that certain things require a significant degree of hard work. And the key there is knowing who you are and what sets you on fire. Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur. There is nothing wrong with working a 9 to 5 and selling a product that you love, or just doing tasks that you enjoy doing and wanting simplicity. There's also nothing wrong with wanting to change the world, and those come with very different skill sets. And I think the more we can have folks talking openly and honestly about their own levels of self-awareness, the choices that they're making because that's what's right for them, and not vilifying one another for whatever path it is that we choose, the healthier our ecosystems, the more supportive our ecosystems will be. So thank you very much for sharing, a little bit of insight into you as the human behind the wrecking ball.
Yeah, I'm learning now that I'm back in Europe. I'm taking a little more time, and I'm doing a little more skiing this winter.
Oh,
And and my walking schedule to clear my mind, where I go for a nice hour, 2 hour walk, is necessary. So, trying to get on that balance is what we're all looking for, whatever habits you may have or trying to break. There's no one size fits all for any of us.
No, absolutely not. And it's so I feel you with that. It was a really interesting transition. I'd always been in global business, but I was based in the U.S. and so I was always supporting folks from across. I would travel and you'd go out, but it's not the same as when you're like ensconced in the culture. And I have to admit that my American work ethic, I passed a lot of judgment when I was in a revenue driving role in the US. I'm like, what do you mean you're not taking meetings at 8 p.m. and you're not working through your holiday? What's your problem? And then I got here and I was like, oh wait, no, like for real, people just check out and go on vacation. Like that's like, you can do that. That's a real thing. And no one died. It was a very liberating experience. So I think I found a happy medium these days. Like I'll never really be able to get rid of the American hustler. Like that's always going to be a part of who I am. But I have, I think, a healthier approach to that now.
Well, it's definitely a faster pace. And, I came from Cleveland, Ohio, and I said, those New York bankers really whipped the hide out of me, and kind of took that Ohio out of me. But that core Ohio is still there. And,
still there.
The European vibe, you could bring a little faster pace, but you also can enjoy it and go for a long 3 hour dinner if need be.
Yeah.
You don't have to slam down a meal in 10 minutes, 30 minutes flat. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, absolutely. And if people, if people want to get in touch with you after listening today, just have questions or want to follow along with your journey, what's the best way to do that?
yeah, I mean, I'm one of those guys that if you get a hold of me through my LinkedIn or you know, I try to reply to everybody. You know, by the end of a day, you know, I always clean off my deck on it. You can also just reach out to our company and we'll try to help you through some decisions. And that's hello at somaipharma.eu and right on our website. And there's, you know, I publish 5 to plus, you know, articles a month. Um, I'm not saying that my opinion is the best one. It's one man's opinion, but I try to give some color to
Yeah.
everybody on topics that are occurring. And so that's also a great source on our website, which is our releases. And you'll have, you know, whatever you're looking for, it's going to be there because I talk a wider range of topics and try to let everybody know, you know, which way I'm thinking or going. And maybe you see it that way. And some people say, I don't see it that way. And I'm like, I could see it your way also.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation, and I look forward to spending time with those resources myself. This is an area I wish to more deeply understand, personally, so that I can advocate for myself and for my kids as we navigate our neurodivergence journeys.
Yeah.
And for everybody else, for everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in to the conversation today. And if you are in need of additional support on your well-being journey, please do feel free to hop on to your app store of choice and download the Seven Summits app. We have some amazing expanded support resources coming out this year, but all of the business support resources are there under the Startup Therapy banner, and I'm always available via the website humanestartup.com. I look forward to catching you all next week.